A model is a person with a role either to promote, display or advertise commercial products, notably fashion clothing and fashion shows, or to serve as a visual aid for people who are creating works of art or to pose for photography. Modeling in American English, is considered to be different from other types of public performance, such as acting or dancing. Although the difference between modeling and performing is not always clear, appearing in a film or a play is not generally considered to be modeling. Types of modeling include fashion, glamour, fitness, bikini, fine art, body part, promotional, and commercial print models. Models are featured in a variety of media formats including books, magazines, films, newspapers, internet and television. Fashion models are sometimes featured in films, Pret-a-Porter and Looker, reality TV shows, America's Next Top Model and the Janice Dickinson Modeling Agency, and music videos, Freedom 90, Wicked Game, Daughters and Blurred Lines. Celebrities, including actors, singers, sports personalities and reality TV stars, frequently participate in modeling contests, assignments as well as contracts in addition to their regular work. Modeling as a profession was first established in 1853 by Charles Frederick Worth, the father of haute couture, when he asked his wife, Marie Vernet Worth, to model the clothes he designed. 1-2, the term house model was coined to describe this type of work. Eventually, this became common practice for Parisian fashion houses. There were no standard physical measurement requirements for a model, and most designers would use women of varying sizes to demonstrate variety in their designs. With the development of fashion photography, the modeling profession expanded to photo modeling. Models remained fairly anonymous, and relatively poorly paid, until the late 1940s, when the world's first three supermodels, Barbara Golan, Bettina Graziani and Lisa Fontagrives began commanding very large sums. During the 1940s and 1950s, Graziani was the most photographed woman in France and the undisputed queen of couture, while Fontagrives appeared on over 200 Vogue covers. Her name recognition led to the importance of Vogue in shaping the careers of fashion models. One of the most popular models during the 1940s was Jinx Falkenberg, who was paid $25 per hour, a large sum at the time. 3. Through the 1950s, Wilhelmina Cooper, Jean Patchett, Dovima, Dorian Lee, Susie Parker, Evelyn Tripp, and Carmen Delorifice also dominated fashion. 4. Dorothea Church was among the first black models in the industry to gain recognition in Paris. However, these models were unknown outside the fashion community. Wilhelmina Cooper's measurements were 38-24-36, whereas Chanel Iman's measurements are 32-23-33. 5. In 1946, Ford Models was established by Eileen and Gerard Ford in New York. It is one of the oldest model agencies in the world. In the 1960s, the modeling world began to establish modeling agencies. Throughout Europe, secretarial services acted as models' agents, charging them weekly rates for their messages and bookings. For the most part, models were responsible for their own billing. In Germany, agents were not allowed to work for a percentage of a person's earnings, so referred to themselves as secretaries. With the exception of a few models traveling to Paris or New York, traveling was relatively unheard of for a model. Most models only worked in one market due to different labor laws governing modeling in various countries. In the 1960s, Italy had many fashion houses and fashion magazines but was in dire need of models. Italian agencies would often coerce models to return to Italy without work visas by withholding their pay. 6. They would also pay their models in cash, which models would have to hide from customs agents. It was not uncommon for models staying in hotels such as La Louisiana in Paris or the Arena in Milan to have their hotel rooms raided by the police looking for their work visas. It was rumored that competing agencies were behind the raids. This led many agencies to form worldwide chains. For example, the Marilyn Agency has branches in Paris and New York. 6. By the late 1960s, London was considered the best market in Europe due to its more organized and innovative approach to modeling. It was during this period that models began to become household names. Models such as Jean Shrimpton, Tanya Mallet, Celia Hammond, Twiggy, Penelope Tree, and dominated the London fashion scene and were well paid, unlike their predecessors. 7. Twiggy became the face of 66 at the age of 16. 8. At this time, model agencies were not as restrictive about the models they represented, although it was uncommon for them to sign shorter models. Twiggy, who stood at 5 feet 6 inches, 168 centimeters, with a 32 inches bust and had a boy's haircut, is credited with changing model ideals. At that time, she earned £80 an hour, while the average wage was £15 a week. In 1967, 7 of the top model agents in London formed the Association of London Model Agents. The formation of this association helped legitimize modeling and change the fashion industry. Even with a more professional attitude towards modeling, models were still expected to have their hair and makeup done before they arrived at a shoot. Meanwhile, agencies took responsibility for a model's promotional materials and branding. That same year, former top fashion model Wilhelmina Cooper opened up her own fashion agency with her husband called Wilhelmina Models. By 1968, FM Agency and Models One were established and represented models in a similar way that agencies do today. 9-10, by the late 1960s, models were treated better and were making better wages. One of the innovators, Ford Models, was the first agency to advance models money they were owed and would often allow teen models, who did not live locally, to reside in their house, a precursor to model housing. The innovations of the 1960s flowed into the 1970s fashion scene. As a result of model industry associations and standards, 11, model agencies became more business-minded, and more thought went into a model's promotional materials. By this time, agencies were starting to pay for a model's publicity. 6. In the early 1970s, Scandinavia had many tall, leggy, blonde-haired, blue-eyed models and not enough clients. It was during this time that Ford Models pioneered scouting. 6. They would spend time working with agencies holding modeling contests. This was the precursor to the Ford Models Supermodel of the World competition, which was established in 1980. Ford also focused their attentions on Brazil, which had a wide array of seemingly exotic models, which eventually led to establishment of Ford Models Brazil. It was also during this time that the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue debuted. The magazine set a trend by photographing bigger and healthier California models, 12, and printing their names by their photos, thus turning many of them into household names and establishing the issue as a hallmark of supermodel status. 12. The 1970s marked numerous milestones in fashion. Beverly Johnson was the first African American to appear on the cover of U.S. Vogue in 1974. 13. Models, including Iman, Grace Jones, Pat Cleveland, Alva Chin, Donielle Luna, Mina Bird, Naomi Sims, and Tukey Smith were some of the top black fashion models who paved the way for black women in fashion. In 1975, Margot Hemingway landed a then unprecedented $1 million contract as the face of Fabergé's Babe perfume, and the same year appeared on the cover of Time magazine, labeled one of the new beauties, giving further name recognition to fashion models. 14. Many of the world's most prominent modeling agencies were established in the 1970s and early 1980s. These agencies created the standard by which agencies now run. In 1974, Neff's Models was established in London with only a men's board, the first of its kind. Elite Models was founded in Paris in 1975, as well as Friday's Models in Japan. 15-16, the next year Cal Carey's was established in Singapore, the first of a chain of agencies in Asia. In 1977, Select Model Management opened its doors, as well as Why Not Models in Milan. By the 1980s, agencies such as Premier Model Management, Storm Models, Mika's, Marilyn, and Metropolitan Models had been established. In October 1981, Life cited Shelley Hack, Lauren Hutton and Iman for Revlon, Margot Hemingway for Fabergé, Karen Graham for Estée Lauder, Christina Ferrare for Max Factor, and Cheryl Tiegs for CoverGirl by proclaiming them the million-dollar faces of the beauty industry. These models negotiated previously unheard of lucrative and exclusive deals with giant cosmetics companies, were instantly recognizable, and their names became well known to the public. 17. By the 1980s, most models were able to make modeling a full-time career. It was common for models to travel abroad and work throughout Europe. As modeling became global, numerous agencies began to think globally. In 1980, Ford Models, the innovator of scouting, introduced the Ford Models Supermodel of the World contest. 18. That same year, John Casablancas opened Elite Models in New York. In 1981, cosmetics companies began contracting top models to lucrative endorsement deals. By 1983, Elite developed its own contest titled the Elite Model Look Competition. In New York during the 1980s there were so-called model wars in which the Ford and Elite agencies fought over models and campaigns. Models were jumping back and forth between agencies such Elite, Wilhelmina, and Ford. 19. In New York, the late 1980s trend was the boyish look in which models had short cropped hair and looked androgynous. In Europe, the trend was the exact opposite. During this time, a lot of American models who were considered more feminine looking moved abroad. 20. By the mid-1980s, big hair was made popular by some musical groups, and the boyish look was out. The curvaceous models who had been popular in the 1950s and early 1970s were in style again. Models like Patty Hansen earned $200 an hour for print and $2,000 for television plus residuals. 21. It was estimated that Hansen earned about $300,000 a year during the 1980s. Citation